Joe Burrow made it very clear this offseason that things were going to have to change in Cincinnati if they were going to get back to the Super Bowl and ultimately win it. And the Bengals front office heard him loud and clear. They addressed a huge need with the defense in a big way by adding Jonathan Allen, Brian Cook, and Boye Mafe just in free agency. And of course, they did make that big swing when they traded the 10th overall pick in this past year's draft for the former Giants DT Dexter Lawrence. In this video, I'm going to explore the Bengals roster and coaching staff and see just how well this Cincinnati front office did to surround Joe Burrow with a situation that's going to set him up for success in 2026. So let's get into it. So the first part of the roster that we're going to be looking at is the skill positions in Cincinnati, and of course it starts with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and for my money this is probably the best 1-2 punch at receiver in the entire league. I guess you can say there are depth concerns behind those two guys. Like, I really like Yosef. I think he's a fine third guy. I think he's actually a really good third guy behind Chase and Higgins, but you could say that the depth is, I guess, a little bit of a concern. They just drafted Colby Young in this past year's draft, but Charlie Jones, Mitch Tinsley are kind of the guys in behind there. But whenever your top two receivers are Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, you really don't want to worry about. You don't want to throw the ball to the guys that are in behind them. So I can certainly see that there. And like I said, Chase and Higgins, for my money, probably the best 1-2 punch, especially with A.J. Brown out of Philly now. I would say definitely the best at least 1-2 receiver duo. And you can argue this skill position group from Cincinnati is one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league. At tight end, you're looking at Drew Sample and Mike Gesicki. I think that's a super solid tight end duo, especially with Gesicki kind of being that basically a slot receiver, a big slot receiver. They're big move tight end. You can kind of do a lot of different things with them. Drew Sample, obviously you put him on the line of scrimmage. So if they want to go two tight ends, they certainly have that ability. Or you just throw Gesicki out there with Chase and Higgins and Yosef, and you basically have four receivers out there, at least 3.5 receivers. So I really like that combination there as well in the tight end room, especially just that Gesicki and Joe Burrow connection. Really like that. And maybe I have Gesicki nightmares. Seems like every time he plays my Bills, whether it was in Miami or in Cincinnati, he just kills them every time. So Gesicki, really nice player for them. And of course, the running back room, super solid as well. Chase Brown and Samaje Perine, always been a very complimentary duo, more the kind of that slash and ground and pound type of guy. And Chase Brown has slowly been rising up that running back list, I guess you could say, in the NFL. Not to say he's a top 5 or a top 3 back or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if you were to go through it yourself. He's probably in the top at least half of the league in running backs, maybe even a top 10 back in the league at this point. Chase Brown, really great player out of the backfield as well. So I am going to give this skill position group for the Cincinnati Bengals overall surrounding Joe Burrow a 9 out of 10. And maybe I could have went with a 10 out of 10 here. I just think a 10 out of 10. It's not quite perfect, obviously. Maybe the tight end room could be upgraded a little bit. The running back room could be upgraded a little bit. Chase and Higgins take this, obviously elevate this to the very top level. And it's not that I don't like the players in the tight end room or the running back room, but if they don't necessarily have top tier guys in those positions as well. So I have a tough time saying it's very perfect. But for my money, this is probably the best skill position group in the entire NFL. And I'm going to stick with a 9 out of 10. Let me know in the comments below if you think I should have gave it the 10 out of a 10. Now we move to the guys that are going to try and protect Joe Burrow this year. And let's start with the young piece, Amarius Mims at tackle. Great rookie year for Mims. You really only expect him to go up from here. Year 2 going to be a big thing for him. And I could see him being a star offensive lineman in this league. Very nice young piece right there. And then their other tackle, Orlando Brown Jr., going into year 4. And since he didn't really seem like that he's been there that long, but going into year 4. Then looking on the inside at their guard spots, Dylan Fairchild going into year 2. And then Dalton Risner. He did start 11 games for Cincy last year in 2025. But maybe you could say that Jalen Rivers ends up winning that job. I think he was their fifth or sixth round pick last year in 2025, ended up starting 7 games for them. So I could really see either of those guys winning that spot. They did bring Risner back this offseason, but not for any money. I think he has like a $3 million cap hit. So nothing crazy that says that he's going to start. So I could certainly see Rivers winning that out in training camp and whatnot. And they did draft 2 guys in the draft as well, a center and a guard as well. So maybe they can factor into this middle of the line. Ted Karras is going to his 5th year with the Cincinnati Bengals, and Karras has started every single game for the team except one over this 5-year stretch. So very solid there. And I do think this line is just that. I think it's just solid. I think it's just fine. I could see them being an average group. Obviously, if Mims kind of takes that jump to being, I don't know, can an offensive lineman be a superstar? I guess so, with all these new guys, Penei Sewell and all these up-and-coming offensive linemen kind of leapfrogging into superstar status. I could certainly see Mims doing that. So maybe if he does that, this offensive line gets to that above-average group. But I am going to give them a 4 out of 10 right now. In all honesty, I'm not a fan of some of these pieces. Orlando Brown Jr., Never have been much of a fan of him, unfortunately. And I do like Ted Karras, and I know he started a lot of games for them, but I just have a hard time whenever he's your second or third best offensive lineman on your line. I have a tough time with that. But again, I do like him, not saying anything as him as a bad player or anything like that. But if Ted Karras is, like I said, your second or maybe even your third best offensive lineman, I don't love that. And then the guards, we'll see, man. Dylan Fairchild going into year 2. A lot of questions at the other guard spot, either Rivers or Risner, probably coming out on top for that. But I am going to go with a 4 out of 10 right now. Coming in just below average, I think that's appropriate. And like I said, if Mims takes a huge jump, this grade could, next season or whatever, could upgrade to a 5, 6, maybe even 7, depending on Jalen Rivers, Dylan Fairchild, how the rest of those guys play. But we're going to stick with a 4 out of 10 for this offensive line in front of Joe Burrow for this 2026 season. And the defense saw the most changes in Cincinnati this offseason. They completely overhauled the defensive line, added Jonathan Allen. Obviously, we already talked about Dexter Lawrence, Boye Mafe. They added Cassius Howell in the draft. And that's just a ridiculous overhaul of the entire front. And the additions of Jonathan Allen and Dexter Lawrence kind of make BJ Hill and TJ Slayton. It kind of puts those guys down in a role, and now those guys are sort of your depth players in behind that. So that's just super solid, really good depth. 4 super solid players you can bring in and consistently stop the run at least. And then, of course, with Jonathan Allen, we'll kind of see what he has left. Dexter Lawrence, though, if he can get back to the Dexter Lawrence that we knew, they'll certainly have that pass rush pop up the middle. And then we already talked about Boye Mafe, and he kind of slides those guys on the edge down a slot as well. Shamar Stewart kind of slots him down a peg. You ask a little bit less of him. Obviously, you still want him to take a step this season. But even Cassius Howell, you don't have to ask Cassius Howell to come in and be your edge 2. Shamar Stewart doesn't work out, or your edge 3 if Shamar Stewart does play well or whatever. But Howell doesn't have to come in and be an edge 2 or an edge 3 right now. He can come in, be that 4th guy that you bring in pass rush situations, and play to his strengths early in his career. So I definitely really like that Boye Mafe signing in free agency. And then, of course, Myles Murphy is going to kind of be that other guy to the other side of Mafe. And I do think he caught on towards the end of last year, but he's really going to have to bring it in 2026 because, like I said, he is going to be that presumed guy. And there are some questions about Shamar Stewart, how being a rookie and whatnot. So there's some questions about some of the depth in behind Myles Murphy. So he definitely has to take a step here in 2026. And I really like this linebacker core of Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight Jr. And I would expect those guys to have big seasons here. They have 4 big body guys. We already talked about it. Dexter Lawrence, BJ Hill, TJ Slayton, Jonathan Allen, just big body dudes. They're going to keep those guards and centers from climbing up to that second level and getting their hands on these linebackers because they are a little bit smaller, but that's just the modern NFL linebacker. But I expect Knight and Carter to have huge seasons, especially, like I said, with those bodies playing in front of them. They can just play clean, play downhill, see the ball, get the ball, and obviously they can play the pass and whatnot. So expect those guys to have a big season as well. DJ Turner and Dax Hill is a great cornerback duo. Really like those guys. I'm curious what they do with Dax Hill at the end of 2026. I do believe 2026 is year 4 for him, so not exactly sure what exactly to do with Dax Hill, whether they get a contract extension done. But regardless, for this season, great young player. I'm a huge fan of Dax Hill. Just curious what they do with them. And then they shore up the safety room around Jordan Battle, another one of their past high draft picks past couple years. Another great player I really like. And they did that by signing Brian Cook and Kyle Duggar in free agency. And I'm curious if they kind of use Duggar more in the slot, sort of like that big nickel type of area, kind of playing those 3 safeties with Duggar and Cook and Battle all on the field at the same time. I thought that's where Duggar was best down the stretch in 2025 with Pittsburgh, so I could certainly see that being the case here as well, but really like that safety room. And I am going to give this defense an overall an 8 out of 10. I really like what they did. Obviously, they weren't fantastic last year, but I think they overhauled a lot of the questions that they needed to address, and I think they did that in a big way. I like their front 7. I love their linebackers. Outside corners are great. Their safeties are really good. Just not a lot of holes to pick in this Cincinnati defense, certainly as of right now. You need to see it come together on the field, but I really like what they did, and we are going to stick with the 8 out of 10 going into the season for the defense opposite Joe Burrow this year. Finally, we do get to coaching. Zach Taylor is going into year 8 as the head coach in Cincinnati. That's just insane to say. Almost been there a decade. But 2 of the last 3 years, his team has hovered right above 500. But last year, the wheels just kind of fell off with a mostly injured Burrow. And the team did go 6-11. So this does kind of feel like a make or break season for Taylor. I know that's kind of tough to say. It led them to a lot of success, but they have had some down years. And if they have a down season this year, Zach Taylor is definitely on the chopping block. And I do believe he does have an expiring contract after this year. You know, those Cincinnati owners, they don't pay coaches to not coach for them. So they typically don't fire coaches, I guess, anyway, prior to their contract expiring. So I do think Zach Taylor does have a contract expiring either this year or next year. It is coming up soon, so we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully they just go on to have a great season and they extend him and all is well in Cincinnati land. But for the other side of the ball, Al Golden is going into his second season as the Cincinnati DC, and obviously it's looking to be a much improved unit from 2025. And I certainly think the defense is much improved from a personnel standpoint, so we'll see if Golden kind of get them back onto the track and get them to look more what they looked like under Lou Anarumo whenever he was really cooking and had them going to the Super Bowl and running up against the Chiefs in the playoffs and whatnot. Hopefully they can get back to a little bit more of that with Al Golden here in 2026. But overall, I am going to only give this coaching situation a 4 out of 10. I'm not the biggest fan of Zach Taylor. I think a lot of coaches could have made, not necessarily, I understand Burrow was hurt last season, but I think a lot of coaches could have done a little bit more than what he has done with what he's been given. We talked about having Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow. That's a pretty stinking good duo. I understand they did go to a Super Bowl, but unfortunately, I've just never been the biggest fan of Zach Taylor. I think he's almost an average coach. We have it at a 4 out of a 10, so I think he's just below average. Maybe I'd have him 16, 17, 18 if you were to rank them all, list all the coaches written out or whatever. But don't necessarily think he's a bad coach. Just don't think he's in that above average or top 10, top 12 echelon. But we'll see. 2026 could prove a lot of that wrong, and this number could go up whenever we do this next year. So my final grade for the situation surrounding Joe Burrow is a 25 out of a 40 possible points, or a 63%. So this means I liked 63% of what surrounds Joe Burrow this offseason, and the rest of that 37% I didn't like so much. So overall, I think Cincinnati made some much needed big swings this offseason, and after the 2025 season, it was very apparent Joe Burrow was getting frustrated with just how the team was performing after the Super Bowl appearance in 2021. But they completely overhauled their defense, added a presumed top-tier player at his position with Dexter Lawrence, and over the last couple years, they have been able to pay T. Higgins, pay Jamar Chase, and pay Joe Burrow to keep that trio around for the long haul. As I've been saying throughout this video, 2026 is going to be a huge season for the Burrow-led Bengals, and in my opinion, the front office improved a lot of the areas of the roster that did really need it. And as you can see, Joe Burrow is tied with Aaron Rodgers for all the situations that I've covered on the channel so far, so if you're curious to see how I got any of those numbers, check the channel. Those videos will be there. But as of right now, he does finish first on my list. And with that, thank you for watching.